So, I'm framing this talk as about OffSec consulting security. It doesn't necessarily.
We have a microphone failure. Hold on, let's do this one. Let's try that.
Okay, well, good. But it kind of applies to any consulting, really. Just out of interest, does anybody here have or want a career in offensive security, pen testing, red teaming, that kind of stuff? Quick show of hands. Okay. Anybody working around that kind of field? So working with pen testers, implementing recommendations. Okay, a little bit more. Okay. So I guess you all know where I'm coming from. Just a quick introduction. That's me. I took a gamble on which side of the screen I would be. I got it wrong. I'm on that side, but okay. I run a company called OffSec, and I help pen test teams with their leadership and development issues. So I guess we all start our offensive security careers, or indeed any career, with a great deal of enthusiasm and optimism, and that's a great thing. And we all like to think we're making a difference and we're trying to help our clients, and that's certainly what I thought. And I still do think that to some extent, although it took me a long time to learn some of the things that we're going to talk about today, which is either because these things are very difficult to learn, or I'm a slow learner. Maybe a combination of those two things. In reality, consulting OffSec isn't just about finding vulnerabilities and exploiting them and so forth. There's a lot more about navigating the relationship with the client. And this is where the counterintuitive bit comes in, because when you start off, you think it's a very tech-heavy thing, which of course it is. But there's this situation where you have to navigate that client relationship, preserve your own integrity and reputation, and also do what the client wants. And that's the bit that's really quite hard. And if you put alongside that the fact that not everybody takes security as seriously as maybe we do in this room, and you realize you have to work a lot harder to be heard than you think you might. So let's get straight in with the spoiler. I've talked in the talk synopsis about misconceptions and the biggest misconceptions. And these are the biggest misconceptions that I've picked up over many years. And one of them, the first one, is that our work will speak for itself and the clients will automatically understand and value it. And in reality, that isn't the case. It's quite hard to be understood. And what seems obvious to a seasoned tester is actually confusing or difficult for a client. And therefore, clients don't always see the value of that work. The other thing is that we think that clients are going to share our priorities and that everything that we do, every test we do that finds issues, the client's going to be grateful about that. Everybody wants to do the best possible depth of testing. And again, my experience over the years has been that isn't always the case. And in many cases, clients actually don't want to see certain things. And the final biggest misconception is that technical correctness is, in fact, the equivalent to being right. And it always wins the argument. But in fact, it doesn't, because right is a very subjective thing. And the client doesn't automatically embrace it. The idea of right to one person is not right to another. We have considerations about budget, timescales, business conditions, and even internal politics always can influence what the perception of right actually is. Perhaps a useful thing, and this is a theme I've seen in a few talks today, it's been repeated. We're living in a really interesting, kind of potentially a golden age of a generational change in technology with AI kind of dominating the landscape. And there's never been a better time to reassess how important it is to actually know what you're talking about. Because there's a lot of tooling around these days that will actually do a lot of work for you. And if you're not in charge of that, if you don't actually understand what you're doing, then there's a very strong chance that you will be automated out of it. There's a lot of really interesting and compelling developments in security tooling. But we must avoid the possibility of becoming mere operators in that scenario and remain in control of what we're doing and being knowledgeable of what's happening, knowing when we run a tool, knowing what the tool's actually doing rather than just running a tool and expecting a certain result. And of course, that's not a new thing, but it's being exacerbated by the increased sophistication of AI-based tooling. So, here's another a counterintuitive thing. Relationships with clients. Now, clients are, obviously they pay our bills, they keep the lights on. It's a very important relationship in a commercial setting. But it's not a friend relationship. Now, some people will say, I have clients I regard as friends. And, okay, maybe they do. And people have client relationships which are very good and very productive. And that's fine too. But it's not a friend relationship. There needs to be some professional distance between you and your client. Sometimes you will have to tell your client things you wouldn't want to. It's not a friend conversation. And there's money involved, so it's automatically not a friend conversation. Professional distance is important. Really, the best client is one that challenges you anyway, and forces you to defend your work. So let's talk briefly about red flags in that client relationship. Again, remember, these are things which seemed initially straightforward, but on further inspection and in retrospect were actually red flags and actually signs that I was about to compromise my own integrity or say something that's going to get me into trouble. Here's the activation phrases for the red flag in the bottom of your mind. Now, some of you will automatically recognize these kinds of conversations that you will have had, whether you're in the offensive security or any other kind of consulting. When somebody says, I just want your opinion on something, that's all of these things you can respond to really quickly. You can knee-jerk react to them and say, yeah, okay, well, here's my opinion. But opinions have a funny way of becoming fact or becoming something, that's what he said, that's what she said. So whenever that happens, I always think we should take a little bit of time to think about it. Another one which is particularly frustrating for anyone who is working in pen testing or OffSec is where you get compared to what the last company found. And that's something which is very hard to respond to. And when you're getting into that conversation, you have to think, why am I being asked this? It might be that the client is trying to frame this conversation or frame this engagement in a way that undermines your integrity or your independence. Alongside the classic, I'm not going to hold you to anything, but whatever. If there's any sales guys in the room or people involved in commercial aspects of the client relationship, you'll know that when a client says, I'm not going to hold you to this, but how much would it be? You know that that's basically exactly what the perception is going to be from there on about pricing. And it's the same elsewhere. Other things which are a little bit frustrating is where the client is trying to frame the engagement as a black and white pass or fail pen testing activity, which is, a misconception thing. In answering these questions, we run the risk, it turns out, of compromising ourselves. So there are things that are very difficult for us to defend professionally. And they are things that all the other red flags are indicators that we may be about to be asked to do. Has anybody ever had a client ask, or have you ever asked a pen tester to remove a finding from a report because it was somehow inconvenient? I'm seeing some nods here and there, yeah. We don't talk about it in public. Well, we're going to talk about it today, but it does happen. It's something where our client might be, and it's not a great client, it's asking you to do this, but it's an indication that they're going to use your reputation. Your reputation is your responsibility. And if you do these things, it more fool you. So looking the other way is another thing. You don't need to look at that. That's been fixed, or that's not an issue you need to find about. But it's in the scope, but I don't want you to test it. These actions are indefensible because later on we have to answer for our own work. And if we do these things, how do we defend that? The client told me to do it. Who the hell's in charge of this engagement? You or the client? Really, you should be in charge of what you're doing. There's also the unanswerable aspect. I do like it when I get asked questions about things I can't answer. How secure are we? I mean, that's completely unanswerable. And okay, I know there are certain things where there may be metrics involved, there may be actual data, hard data involved, where you can say we have improved, we've fixed these vulnerabilities, whatever else. And I get that, that's okay. But the open question, how secure are we, is completely unanswerable. And really, not the job of a pen test anyway. The job of a pen test is to locate, exploit, and offer remediation. It telling the client something they don't know. Or validating some assumptions. It's certainly not to say you are secure or you are not secure. That's yet another rabbit hole. How do we compare? How likely is it we'll be hacked? If we implement this product, would it help us? Again, really, really thin ice there. I'm not going to recommend a particular customer implement a particular product. That you speak to those guys yourself. Do your own market research. Yes, I have an opinion. Maybe it's a useful opinion. Maybe it's not. But it's just an opinion. If the product doesn't actually work, then all of a sudden it's going to be my fault. Another great example, something I've been involved in very recently actually, is where a client comes back and said, a researcher found this issue. You didn't find it. Your team did not find this, and it's really obvious. Well, when I looked at it, it wasn't obvious at all. It was it's obvious when it was there, and a researcher had spent 6 months finding it. But during the 2 weeks we were working on it, it wasn't obvious at all. So again, those are the sort of questions you can't answer. And the trick here, of course, is to not engage in answering these questions as far as is possible. I see testers all the time being bounced back and forth in these arguments stemming from these unanswerable questions. And the winning strategy is just not to engage. I'm not saying we should ignore our clients, but you get my point. Here's another thing which is counterintuitive, and that is that being helpful isn't really helpful for a number of reasons. And the two things that a lot of times, and I used to do this all the time, what I think as being helpful for the client was over-delivering and working more time than was outside of the test window. The over-delivering thing absolutely bites you back in the backside later on, because sometimes the client doesn't actually thank you for finding more things for them to fix. They see all the issues as problems for them to resolve. If you hadn't told them, they wouldn't have to fix it. Even that is a counterintuitive thing, but a lot of clients think like that. A lot of people think like that. You've given me a problem to fix. We haven't. The problem's already there, but now you know about it. Working outside the test window has more than once caused issues where we weren't actually aware that the client was monitoring what we were doing, and turns out that somebody working offshore at 3 a.m. caused somebody in New York to be pulled out of bed because of some stock-related incident we weren't aware of. We didn't think that was a problem. We didn't bother to check. We just thought we were trying to be helpful, but we weren't being helpful at all. So I begin this slide with a quote from the great Clint Eastwood. Opinions are like assholes, everybody has one. And that's true. But really, we get called to give our opinion and to offer that advice all the time. But when we offer it, we have to remember that our outlook is different, our perspective is different. We also have to remember, and this is something which took me a long time to learn, is that when you give your opinion or your advice, it's sometimes taken extremely literally. So when you, for example, in a report, you provide an example of an exploit, which might include a little bit of JavaScript or something showing, oh, look at this, I can pop up an alert box. There you go. I've proven the point. There's an injection point there. So the client whitelists that specific example in the report that you gave. When then they say, well, it's been fixed. And you say, well, no, that was just a generic example. You need to filter things more fundamentally than that. That's not what you said in the report. Oh, okay. Those sort of things happen quite a lot. So you can alternate between being ignored and not taken seriously at all through to being taken very seriously and absolutely literally. So it's important to us to differentiate facts from opinions, be very clear, work out whether something is, we're giving an example or whether we're giving the very specific thing that needs to be done, and talk about caveats in a minute. But draft recommendations and caveats to robustly defend our work. All these things took me a long time to discover. Okay, this is not mandatory, and it's not really audience participation, so it's completely falsely titled. However, just a show of hands. Here are genuine examples of things that happen quite frequently to any of you involved in this kind of work. You'll probably be familiar with these types of scenarios. Okay, a quick show of hands. Anybody think it's okay if the client says, we need more money for a security tooling, and ultimately we need you to raise the severity? No one does that? Okay, just me. All right, fine. Okay, of course it's not okay. How about it's okay to be a pen test on a client's competitor as long as the client said it's okay? No? Okay, that's pretty straightforward. The system owner has to give the permission. Okay, we got that. Mark a finding as fixed if the client confirms it's resolved. No, you've got to work it out for yourself. You're going to report what you see. If you're reporting opinion other than fact, you're in thin ice. What about removing a finding from the final report once you've confirmed it's resolved? So you're removing all evidence of it. No, not a good idea either. If you remove that, then basically you're removing the indication there was ever even an issue to begin with. So that's not an accurate trail. And the last but not least, client rings up and says, sorry, I'm on the road. You can start testing, it's fine. Just take this message as authorization to test. No, I wouldn't either. To test what? You know, I didn't say you could test that. I said the stuff we talked, confusion. Okay, so I'm going to pick up the pace now because time is slipping by. How do we survive this? Well, we survive this by having a toolkit. I talk about ACDC all the time. People who've worked with me in the past will know this is one of the things I bang on about. Actionability, correctness, defensibility, and clarity. These are the things our work has to exhibit through every finding, every interaction. Making sure that something can be done, it's correctly identified, we can give reasons why we've made that recommendation, and of course the whole thing is clear. If you observe those characteristics in your work, you won't go too far wrong. Also, the scrutiny aspect. As offensive security people, we are under scrutiny. We do have to defend our work, and you have to be prepared at any time to answer the question, those questions. What were you doing? Why were you doing it? How do you explain what you got? And if you're running random tooling in someone's environment without knowing what's happening, you will not be able to answer at least one of those questions. Let's talk briefly about the art of the caveat. Caveats are important because they influence the test. Well, they describe factors that influence the test in some way. And they're not an excuse for inadequate testing. But what they do is they make sure that in the future, when nobody remembers that the test targets were unavailable on time, creds didn't work, the test start was delayed, your contact went on holiday for 2 weeks without telling you, all these things get lost in time. But if the report specifies that they were caveats for the test, at least there's some context that can be applied. So this is if you take nothing away from this talk, you should take away just this. And that is that we all want to be taken seriously, of course, and there are many things that clients don't take seriously, but we should not be one of those things. And being taken seriously begins with self-awareness and how the client perceives you, and that difference between how you're perceived and how you think you're being perceived. And this is the thing that took me the longest time to learn and has been the most valuable lesson over the last quarter of a century. I sometimes see myself, and we see ourselves, as all of those things there on the left. Confident, authoritative, telling it like it is, technically strong, defending your point when you know I'm right. All great points. I'm sure you'll agree. However, in the wrong circumstances, it comes across rather differently to the client. And you only know this is happening when you can feel the frustration rising, but you have to work on this sort of thing. This disconnection between perception and reality is a cause of stress. And not being listened to is not easy to live with. This isn't really a self-help talk, so I'll move on. But that's a very valuable lesson. It took me a while to learn that. Also, it's not all about us. We have to remember that we are part of a bigger picture. We're only there to help in a small part of what the client's trying to do. However, our work and our reputation is our responsibility. Bad work lives forever. A report goes out there with your name on the front. It's out there forever. All this takes practice. Very quick deviation. We are not here to save the world. We're not vigilantes. We're not exempt from the law. People have said this in other talks as well. And I would say that I believe that there's a narrative that somehow we are kind of saviors in some way. And I think that's not very useful in offensive security, because it means if we believe that, we believe we're here doing something for, a higher calling of some kind, and we stop listening. And then if you stop listening, we start coming across in the way I've just described. And then we get all the stress associated with that. We always talked about how being right is subjective. So I'll breeze through that one. So let's reframe some of the misconceptions I started off with. Ultimately, integrity is part of our own reputation, our own defensibility. Our work has to be defensible. We have to listen to what the client's saying. And being right is something which is in the eye of the beholder. Though, if we understand those misconceptions, all of a sudden our jobs get a lot easier. So some positive closing thoughts. There's a lot of negativity in what I've said so far. I actually love our industry. I think it's great. I think we're living in a great time, as I said at the beginning. It's a great way to work at the leading edge of technology and thinking. We're at the edge of a generational shift right now. The next few years are going to be great. I've no idea what they're going to be, but they are going to be great. And that is all I have to say about that. Other than, if you want to follow me on LinkedIn, please do so. Thanks, guys.
Well, it's nearly the end, and you finally get it, and you managed to clap at the right time. Well done. Any questions? No? Honestly, come on. He's just... Yes, good. Right, get the steps in. Come on, this is your opportunity to learn from people. Ask interesting questions. You've just had an interesting talk. What's wrong with you? Just like my students, they always sit there and don't ask me anything anyway.
Very interesting. I'm a consultant, but I'm left shift, so yes. I don't want penetration testing. I should have done all the good work beforehand. The A word I keep on using is accountability. So where does accountability lie in terms of what we as security professionals do and where the business lies and the fuzzy area in between?
It is a fuzzy area. I would say that personally we're all accountable. Like I mentioned there briefly, our own reputation, our own is our own responsibility. Our own integrity is our own responsibility. It's our name on the front. Yes, maybe a corporate brand on there as well. Our employer's brand is on there. But it's your name, it's our name on the front. There's a whole discussion about in certain jurisdictions where security professionals are personally liable for decisions being made. I think the UK is a little bit more liberal than that. The US is less liberal. But we should all be aware that there are consequences for our actions and should take them seriously. This is a profession, ultimately, a very, very young one, admittedly, not like the law or anything else. But a profession nevertheless, and we should act accordingly.
Any more for any more? Yes. Good person, right at the very front. This is how you learn things, by asking questions.
Thank you. Very interesting talk. I just wanted to ask, how do you deal with those sort of unanswerable questions that you get? And have you found that if you get asked these questions and you perhaps try and turn it into a different question or try and answer a different question, does the client then get frustrated with you, and how do you deal with that?
Yeah, there's not an easy answer to that. You're absolutely right, and I was going to try and illustrate that by answering a different question, but you'd already predicted that. So, politicians do it beautifully, don't they? They kind of learn how to, and all of a sudden everyone's talking about something else. It's not a case of deceit. It's a case of not taking it on. But communicating with the client, just say, that's not something I can answer for you, and give reasons why. It's okay to not answer a question in that sort of polite, graceful way, to withdraw from the discussion rather than say, can't answer that. Obviously that's just poor communication. But yeah, trying not to, just don't take it on.
Any more? Right, you can go and get a cup of tea and a coffee. One more round of applause, please, and I'll see you in half an hour or so.